The restaurant lights shimmered against the crystal glasses, and the faint scent of truffle butter mingled with cheap champagne. My sister stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her hair catching the soft glow as she raised her glass. The diamond glinted before her hand turned. And that's when I saw it. My mother's ring. The one that had disappeared after the funeral. The one she'd sworn she never found. The room froze mid-toast, forks hovering mid-air as her smile faltered just enough for me to know she saw my face first. My name is Valerie, I'm 34 years old, and this is how I turned my sister's lie into her unraveling. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The clink of champagne glasses never came, just an awkward echo of someone clearing their throat and the squeak of a waiter's shoe on the hardwood floor. The sound stretched the silence until it became unbearable, like the restaurant itself was holding its breath. I didn't say a word. I just blinked, slowly, once, and reached for my water glass instead of my flute. The condensation left a wet ring on the linen, one small circle of truth amid all the crystal lies. She lowered her hand, not fast, careful, deliberate, like she'd suddenly remembered she was being watched. Her fingers curled in on themselves, and I could see her knuckles blanch white around the stem of the glass. My mother's ring caught the low light once more before it vanished beneath her hand. The diamond had a quiet confidence to it, like it knew exactly where it came from. She took a sip, pretending nothing happened, pretending the air hadn't just changed texture, pretending she wasn't wearing the one thing that tied us both to the woman who raised us. That diamond glint was louder than any accusation. It rang in my skull like a small bell that wouldn't stop. It was a French bistro in the Arts District outside Atlanta, the kind that served entrees on oversized plates and charged $28 for scallops that could fit in a teacup. The kind of place where couples pretended they weren't fighting and old money came to feel casual. The lights were dim but golden, warm enough to make secrets look soft. Soft jazz curled through the air like smoke. The clatter of forks, the low hum of conversation, the flicker of candles trapped in glass jars, all of it formed a rhythm I couldn't escape. Their engagement dinner was supposed to feel intimate, elegant, like something out of a wedding magazine. And for everyone else, maybe it did. Evan, her fiancé, was beaming. He had that fresh success glow, the kind of man who made eye contact with waiters and called them by name. His parents had flown in from Connecticut, their accents clipped and approving. My dad looked like he had finally exhaled after years of saying things like, "One day she'll settle down." Me? I sat at the far end of the table, next to the coat rack and a draft that wouldn't quit. She didn't look at me again after the toast, but I'd seen enough to know it wasn't some look-alike. Not costume jewelry, not coincidence. It was hers, my mother's. The antique double-pronged design, the faint nick on one side of the band, the slightly cloudy crescent within the stone. Every detail was burned into me. I'd seen that ring trace the edge of coffee mugs, press through pie crust, glint when my mother laughed in sunlight. That ring had been part of our family language. When I saw it again, alive on my sister's hand, something old inside me flinched. After cancer hollowed my mother out in a Tennessee winter, there hadn't been much left to hold on to. A few recipes scribbled in the margins of a church cookbook. A set of china she refused to store because things need to be used, not worshipped. And that ring, I kept it in a small velvet box, wrapped in tissue, tucked inside the safe deposit drawer labeled in my mother's looping script until it vanished. My sister cried when I asked about it. "I swear, Val, I don't know where it went." She had that high, breathy tone that always made people trust her. She put her hand on my shoulder, her face soft, almost maternal, like she was comforting me for even asking. We were still wearing black then, still answering casseroles at the door, still pretending we knew how to live without our mother. And I believed her, because grief needs something to believe in, because I couldn't handle losing two people at once. But tonight changed everything. I didn't eat much after that. My appetite had turned to dust. I excused myself midway through the risotto course, claiming I needed a minute. In truth, I needed to see the ring again, to confirm what my heart already knew. The hallway behind the dining room smelled like detergent and wine. I walked slow, past the waiter's station, toward the narrow corridor that opened to the main floor. The laughter coming from their table had a strange brightness to it, brittle, rehearsed. My sister threw her head back, white teeth flashing, her hand lifted, wine glass tilted, the diamond flashing like a signal flare. I raised my phone and took the first photo. The reflection caught in the mirror behind her chair. Her profile, the ring gleaming in the candlelight, a tiny piece of my mother's ghost captured in pixels. My thumb trembled as I hit save. Then I slipped back to the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had cracked. My eyes looked harder than I remembered. When I returned, I smiled, nodded, took a polite bite of roasted duck I couldn't taste. Evan caught my eye once. "You okay?" he mouthed, his brow creased. I nodded, tight smile, a lie to match hers. By dessert, the room had relaxed. Champagne flowed again. Someone joked about honeymoon plans. My sister glowed under the attention, spinning that same hand in every gesture. Each flick of her wrist was a taunt. The ring winked at me like it was in on the joke. I kept sipping water, letting silence harden around me. Every polite laugh from her was another nail in her own coffin. Because I learned something about betrayal. If you react too quickly, they rewrite the story. You become the problem. But if you wait, if you let them hang themselves with their own charm, the truth becomes undeniable. After dinner, guests lingered by the entrance, posing for photos under the bistro sign. I stayed back, pretending to check messages. The photo I'd taken glowed faintly on my screen. Proof. When I finally stepped outside, the cold air smelled like rain and exhaust. My dad jingled his keys, surprised when I asked to ride back with him. "You sure you don't want to ride with them?" he asked, tilting his head toward my sister and Evan, now laughing near their Uber. "I'm sure." He didn't press. My dad never did. The truck smelled like cedar air freshener and old coffee. The country station murmured through static. We didn't talk. Just the hum of the tires and the sound of my own heartbeat counting seconds. Out the window, the Georgia night stretched wide, billboard lights bleeding into fog, bare trees flicking past like black brushstrokes. And somewhere between the exit signs and the empty highway, my mind slipped backward. Thanksgiving 2021. My mother in her favorite apron, floral print faded to ghost colors. The kitchen smelled of sage and pie crust. She wore that ring as she carved the turkey, hands trembling but steady. She'd caught me watching and smiled. "Some things don't belong in a will," she said, tapping the diamond. "They belong in hands that remember." Those words never left me. Weeks later, when hospice brought her bed to the living room, I packed her jewelry box myself. I placed the ring in velvet, tucked it under her handwritten note, "For Valerie, when you're ready to start again." But after the funeral, when the casseroles cooled and the condolences faded, the box was gone. I remember standing in her bedroom, drawers half open, sunlight dull on the carpet, my sister in the doorway, eyes red. "I don't know where it went, Val. Maybe the movers?" She even sounded tired, like my questions were unfair, and I let it go, because she was grieving too, because I thought love meant choosing peace over proof. Now, in the truck's dim glow, I could see how foolish that was. Grief fogs the edges of reality. It makes thieves look like victims. The next morning, I started slow. The light through my blinds was pale and indifferent. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at my desk with my laptop open. My fingers hovered before I typed, "Me. Do you remember that jewelry inventory list we made after the funeral? Did we write down Mom's ring?" Melanie, my cousin. "Yeah, I think I have a photo. Want me to check?" 5 minutes later, she sent it. A grainy photo of a handwritten list, line 14, gold ring, single diamond, antique setting, marked for Valerie. My pulse quickened. I opened my email, searched Grayson Estate. There it was, the attorney's message from March 2022. Attached, the official list filed with Fulton County. I clicked the PDF, scrolled down, and found it again. Item 14, gold ring, diamond solitaire, designated beneficiary, Valerie Henderson. The paper trail was clean, undeniable. I leaned back, heart drumming. The hum of my refrigerator sounded louder than it should have. I could stop there. Pretend I didn't know. Pretend the photo on my phone didn't exist. Pretend the law wasn't already on my side. But pretending had cost me enough. My mother's voice echoed again, soft but steady. "Some things belong in hands that remember." And mine were shaking. Not from fear, but from something closer to clarity. I opened my phone, enlarged the photo of my sister's hand, zoomed in until the diamond filled the screen. Then I whispered out loud, just once, "Got you." The first spark of revenge is quiet. It doesn't roar. It hums. The morning after the dinner, the sky over Atlanta looked washed out. That kind of pale, exhausted blue that only hangs after too many half-truths float through a room and settle overnight. The air was heavy, damp from a thin drizzle that clung to the windows. I stood in Dad's kitchen barefoot, the linoleum cool beneath my feet, the same creaky pattern I used to dance across as a kid when Mom made pancakes on Sundays. The place smelled faintly of floor wax and burnt toast, a scent that never quite left, no matter how many times he switched brands. The coffee pot gurgled on the counter, steady and low, filling the kitchen with its bitter steam. Upstairs, I could hear Dad humming to some old country song while his razor scraped across the sink. It was the same tune he always hummed when he didn't want to think too hard about something. For a second, I almost convinced myself to let it go. Almost. I sat at the table with my phone, scrolling back through the photos from last night. The mirror shot was perfect. Pie, my sister mid-laugh, unaware. The diamond catching the candlelight as if proud of itself. I zoomed in until the tiny crescent flaw under the stone filled the screen. Proof didn't always need drama. Sometimes it came quiet, wrapped in reflection. The second photo, the one caught in the champagne glass, looked softer, but it was enough. The distortion of the glass made it dreamlike, but the glint was unmistakable. My mother's ring had survived death only to mock me at dinner. I attached both photos to an email addressed to myself and titled it Ring Documentation, Private. Then I deleted them from my camera roll. It was habit, muscle memory from years in accounting. Always keep evidence where no one else can reach. Always keep the truth archived, not exposed. When Dad came downstairs, the morning news played low on the TV. Stock updates, weather reports, the small talk of people pretending the world's predictable. He was dressed in his pressed blue shirt and Sunday casual khakis, looking 10 years younger in the kind of light that forgave everything. "Heading out so soon?" he asked, leaning on the doorframe, coffee mug in hand. "Yeah," I said, slipping my laptop into my bag. "Got some errands back in Nashville." He nodded once, lips pressed in that quiet, fatherly way that meant I won't ask if you don't want to say. He'd always been good at silence. Mom used to joke that he could build a house out of it. Driving north on I-75, the road stretched flat and endless. Tractor trailers roared past, their wakes shaking my little sedan. The morning light bounced off wet asphalt, turning everything silver. I kept thinking about the last time Mom and I went to Schaefer's, the jeweler downtown near Peachtree. She'd wanted the ring cleaned before my cousin's wedding. I could still smell the silver polish when I thought of that day. Hear the bell over the shop door, the old clock ticking in the corner. She'd said, "If anything ever happens to me, this place knows its history better than anyone." I didn't know then how literal that would become, so I stopped there. The storefront was exactly the same. Hand-painted gold letters on glass, the kind of place that never bothered to modernize. Inside, clocks of every size ticked just out of sync, filling the air with a gentle chaos. The jeweler looked up from behind the counter, a middle-aged man with reading glasses perched on his head and a smudge of polishing compound on his sleeve. "Hi," I said, stepping closer. "I think my mother used to bring her jewelry here. Patricia Harper?" He blinked, thinking, then his face lit with recognition. "Patty Harper? Yeah, sweet lady. Always talked about her girls. You must be Valerie." "That's right," I said, my throat tight. He smiled softly, then turned toward the back. A few minutes later, he came out with an old leather-bound ledger. Pages yellowed and corners worn, graphite smudges darkened from decades of touch. He flipped through until his finger stopped. "She brought in a few pieces over the years," he said, reading. "Ring resizing, watch repair. Here it is. 1 diamond ring, gold band, antique setting." He turned the book toward me, the lines faint but legible. The last date was November 2021, 2 months before she passed. Next to it, written in her handwriting, a note. "For daughter Valerie." My heart lifted. For a second, like she was still alive inside the ink. Then, just below it, another entry, dated 3 months after her funeral. Cleaning and resizing. Customer. Rachel Harper. My sister's name. The letters hit me harder than any slap could have. I stared at the page, the breath in my lungs turning thin. "You're sure that's the same ring?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Same serial engraving inside the band. I remember because she said it was her mother's. Wanted it to fit her engagement finger. Said it felt symbolic." Symbolic. That word burned. I nodded slowly, my hand steadying on the counter, though every muscle wanted to shake. Could I get a copy of that receipt? He hesitated. Normally, we don't release client records. It's for estate documentation, I interrupted, forcing calm into my voice. Legal ownership. Something in my tone, maybe the mix of grief and precision, made him relent. He walked to the back again, and when he returned, he handed me a thin sheet of paper that smelled faintly of toner and metal dust. Here you go, he said softly. Outside, the air felt heavier. I sat in my car with that paper spread across my lap, the ink still warm, the words vibrating with betrayal. The receipt fluttered as the AC kicked in, and I realized I was shaking. I pressed my hand flat over the page to stop it. On the drive back to Nashville, the highway felt endless again. I called Melanie, my cousin. The phone rang twice before her voice filled the car speaker. Hey Val, you okay? Can you send me that photo of the appraisal report Mom filed, the one with the serial engraving? She paused. Yeah, hang on. Why? Just checking something. It took her less than an hour. The message popped up while I was parked at a rest stop near Dalton. The engraving number in her photo matched the jeweler's exactly. That night, I sat at my dining table, the paper spread out like a crime scene. Estate documents, the appraisal photo, the jeweler's receipt, and that mirror shot from the restaurant. Each piece fit like a puzzle that had been waiting for me to see it whole. Proof layered over proof, ink over memory. For 3 days, I said nothing. Went to work. Balanced spreadsheets, ate leftover pasta. Pretended normal life wasn't cracking beneath me. But every time I opened my laptop, that email sat in my inbox, quiet and loaded. By Friday night, my hands couldn't sit still. I reread the vineyard invitation she'd mailed weeks earlier. Pastel lettering, gold foil script. Rachel and Evan, forever starts here. The date circled in ink. Saturday arrived with thick heat and a sun that refused to be gentle. The air smelled of honeysuckle and humidity as I drove up the gravel path to the vineyard. Rows of grapevines climbed the hillside, the leaves shimmering under white tents. Guests sipped mimosas and laughed over a country playlist. Everything was pastel and perfect. Blush dresses, linen suits, laughter floating like confetti. When my sister spotted me across the patio, her face flickered for half a second before settling into her hostess smile. Val, you made it. Wouldn't miss it, I said. She leaned in for a hug that barely brushed air. Her perfume, something floral and expensive, filled the space between us. I felt the graze of the ring against my shoulder as she pulled away. I didn't look down. Not yet. Evan greeted me next, his warmth so genuine it almost made me ache. Glad you came, he said. Rachel said you've been working nonstop. Yeah, I replied, something like that. He smiled, oblivious. That was the thing about good men. They never imagine deceit in the people they love. During the toast, her friends took turns gushing about the most perfect couple and how Rachel always had impeccable taste. I watched her hand slide over his arm, the ring glittering like it wanted applause. Then the photographer, a young woman in a floppy hat and dusty boots, stepped closer with her camera. Let's get a close-up of that beautiful heirloom ring, she said brightly. Heirloom. Rachel's smile twitched. Just a half-second glitch, but enough. Oh, this? It was my mother's, she said quickly, turning her hand toward the lens. The air thickened. Evan's brow furrowed. Wait, he said, half laughing. I thought your mom left that ring to Val. The photographer froze, lowering her camera. Guests shifted, the sound of champagne pouring slowing to a stop. Rachel laughed, too loud, too brittle. Oh, well, Mom didn't really. It wasn't official. We just. Actually, I said, standing, it was official. The crowd stilled. I pulled an envelope from my purse and set it beside the cake knife. That ring has an engraving inside the band, 1974 PH. I have the estate documentation and the jeweler's record to prove it. Rachel's face went pale. Evan stared at her, his jaw tightening. Rachel, he said quietly, is that true? She opened her mouth, closed it again. She's mistaken. She must be. I didn't argue. I just slid the jeweler's receipt across the table. Her signature gleamed under the sunlight, the date staring up like a verdict. Silence hit the courtyard. Even the cicadas outside seemed to pause. Evan's mother whispered something to her husband. A bridesmaid pretended to check her phone. Rachel swallowed. You could have just come to me, she said, voice trembling. I did, I said softly. 2 years ago. Then I turned and walked away. The gravel crunched under my heels, every step deliberate. Behind me, voices rose. Evan's confusion, Rachel's breaking tone, the sound of something collapsing. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan. I need to talk. Alone. I didn't respond. I sat in the still air, the vineyard laughter dissolving behind me, and felt something unfamiliar spread through my chest. Peace. Edged with purpose. Because this was never just about a stolen heirloom. It was about truth. The kind my mother said always finds light, no matter how deep it's buried. I didn't respond to Evan's message until the next morning, not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I needed the silence to settle. Silence has weight when you've been living in noise. Some truths deserve a pause before the next conversation begins, like a wound that needs a moment to breathe before it's stitched. When I finally texted him back, I kept it short. Me. I'll meet you at the Riverwalk. Noon. He replied within minutes. Okay. No hesitation, no emoji, just that single word that carried more gravity than anything else could. The Riverwalk in downtown Nashville was still and gray that Sunday. Early enough that the tourists hadn't arrived, the food trucks hadn't rolled in, and the street musicians were still asleep. The river moved slow, thick, green, unbothered, like it had seen everything and learned not to react. I found a weather-worn bench near the railing, crossed my arms, and let the wind tug at my hair while I watched the current drift past like a thought I didn't want to finish. Evan arrived 5 minutes early. That told me everything. Slacks, no jacket, a shirt that looked pressed but slept in. He looked deflated, not broken. More like someone trying to stay composed through a conversation he already knew would hurt. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I nodded, didn't offer a smile. There wasn't room for small kindnesses today. He sat down beside me but left a careful gap, the kind that acknowledged boundaries without saying them out loud. His fingers tapped once on his knee before going still. I had no idea, he said quietly. I swear, Val. I looked at him for a long second. I believe you. His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. You wouldn't have asked to meet if you were lying, I added. He exhaled, not a sigh exactly, but the kind of shaky breath that sounds like something giving up inside a person. She told me it was a family piece, he said. Said she didn't know much about its history. I figured, we talked about using it for our own wedding bands, repurposing it. His voice broke a little on that last word, as if he already hated how it sounded. It was my mother's, I said. She gave it to me with a note. Rachel knew that. She helped me pack the box. She saw the velvet case. Evan rubbed the back of his neck and looked down at the ground. The wind pushed a few leaves past his shoes. Why would she do that? I shrugged, slow, tired. Because some people want to build their new life out of stolen pieces of someone else's. He looked away, out toward the water, his reflection trembling in the surface. His silence said everything. He asked if he could keep copies of the documents I'd shown him. The estate papers, the jeweler's receipt, the photos. Not to protect Rachel, but because, as he said, I need to know I'm not crazy for walking away from this. You're not, I said. We didn't talk much after that. He thanked me, softly, like gratitude hurt to say. When he stood, his shoulders slumped forward as if the air had gotten heavier. I watched him walk away toward the parking lot, his figure shrinking between the trees until it disappeared into sunlight. By Monday morning, the fallout began. Rachel called me 6 times. I didn't answer once. She left 3 voicemails, each one unraveling a little more than the last. The first was indignant. Rachel, voicemail. I cannot believe you ambushed me like that. In front of Evan, in front of his family. What is wrong with you? The second one tried to sound calm, almost reasonable. Rachel, it wasn't even about the ring, Val. It's just a piece of jewelry. You could have come to me. Again. The third one cracked. Rachel, I didn't think it would matter this much. I just wanted something of Mom's too. Something people would see. You always got the personal things, the moments. She wrote to you. I got photos. I was jealous, okay? That was the first honest thing she'd said in years, but I didn't call her back, because honesty after the damage doesn't repair what it broke. It just documents it. By Tuesday afternoon, Mel texted me a screenshot of a Facebook post from one of Rachel's bridesmaids. "Wishing my girl strength through tough times. Love you, sis." That's how I found out the engagement was officially over. Evan called off the wedding quietly. No public drama, no social media spectacle. Just a line of canceled deposits and one very expensive dress return. Rachel moved out of their shared apartment by the end of the week. I didn't see it happen. But Mel did. She said Rachel stood outside with 2 suitcases and a garment bag, waiting for a rideshare, her hair still curled like she'd expected someone to stop her. No one did. The neighbors didn't ask questions. Evan didn't come out. It was quiet, clean, poetic, almost, but it wasn't over. That Friday, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Sharp, slightly slanted, like she wrote fast to outrun her guilt. Inside was a single folded receipt. Pawn shop, Franklin, Tennessee, dated 6 months ago. Item description: gold locket, 1940s, with initials PH. My stomach dropped. That was Mom's too. A small oval locket she'd gotten from her father before he went to war. She never wore it, but every Christmas she'd take it out, show it to us, and say, "Some things aren't meant to be flashy. They just remember for you." I hadn't even noticed it missing, but Rachel had, and she'd sold it long before the ring ever resurfaced. Under the receipt, she'd scribbled 5 words. "I'm not who you think." No apology, no explanation, just that single sentence like a confession written too late. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time staring at it. The air conditioner hummed, distant cars passed outside, and somewhere in the back of my head, I could hear Mom's voice saying, "She's still your sister, Val. Don't let bitterness win." But love without boundaries isn't love. It's permission. I folded the receipt and placed it back inside the envelope. I didn't throw it away. I kept it, not out of spite, but because truth, even ugly truth, deserves to be kept somewhere safe. A week passed, then another. Life found its rhythm again, slower, quieter, work, laundry, grocery runs, a silence that didn't ache anymore. But something had shifted, not just in her world, in mine. The kind of shift that happens when you stop waiting for apologies and start making peace with what's gone. Because that ring, it wasn't just metal and memory, it was a promise. A small, shining proof that some legacies don't end in silence. One Sunday afternoon, I drove out to the cemetery on the edge of town. The Tennessee hills were beginning to blush with early fall. Small pockets of orange, rust, and gold threaded through green. The air smelled like damp earth and pine needles. I parked near the old oak and walked the gravel path to my mother's headstone. I carried the ring with me in its velvet box. The stone was cool under my fingers when I knelt. Her name looked softer than I remembered, worn slightly by rain. I placed the box at the base, opened it, and let the diamond catch the late afternoon light. For a moment, I imagined her standing beside me, apron dusted with flour, hair tucked behind one ear, that patient smile she always wore when life got messy. "I brought it back," I whispered, "just for a bit." The wind moved through the trees, making the leaves whisper back. I could almost hear her voice again, the one she used when I was younger and wanted to give up. "They'll write their own endings," she'd say. "We just have to make sure they don't erase ours." I smiled through the ache. After a few minutes, I closed the box and took it with me. Not to wear it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But to keep it where it belonged. Somewhere honest. Somewhere safe. Somewhere she'd still recognize it. It wasn't the ring that haunted me. Not exactly. It was the silence that followed. The way everyone who had been so loud at the engagement dinner suddenly went quiet. Like the air around my sister collapsed and no one wanted to be caught inside it. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear from anyone in the family. No calls, no texts, just that kind of emptiness that hums under the surface of ordinary days. Not my father, not our aunts, not even Melanie, who usually had no problem sending me long messages about car repairs, office gossip, or which cousin was filing for divorce next. But this time, nothing. The absence became its own kind of presence. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped before disappointment settled back in. I told myself I didn't care, but every silence is a statement, and this one was louder than any words they could have said. Then, one morning, I opened my mailbox and saw a thick manila envelope wedged between junk mail flyers and a grocery ad. My name was written across the front in careful blue ink, the kind lawyers use when they want to appear neutral. The corner bore the familiar seal of our family's probate firm, Harris and Grayson. No warning, no heads up, just the weight of it sitting there like an accusation. I carried it back inside like it might burn me. The kitchen light flickered as I laid it flat on the counter. My coffee went cold as I traced the embossed logo on the envelope's edge, a tiny balance scale that suddenly felt like a joke. Inside, the letter was brief and perfectly polite. The kind of language that hides knives in paperwork. Dear Ms. Harper, we have received a request from Ms. Rachel Harper regarding an inquiry into the estate of the late Patricia Harper. The inquiry concerns items of sentimental value not formally appraised at the time of distribution. My mother's ring. The locket. Maybe more. I flipped the next page. Legal phrasing, dense and cold. Rachel was trying to reopen the estate file. Not for money, she couldn't touch that, but to challenge the distribution of heirlooms. To cast doubt. To muddy the water just enough that I'd drown in the cost of defending it. It was clever. Cruel, but clever. And it told me exactly what she wanted. Not the jewelry, not even justice. Control. The last word. But my mother had taught me something long before lawyers and grief got involved. Always keep receipts. Literally and metaphorically. So I did. I gathered everything. Every document I'd saved. From the jeweler, from the appraisal, from the official probate filing, even the scanned PDF of Mom's handwritten note that read, "For Valerie, when you're ready to start again." I made copies of copies. Digital backups. Printed a clean binder with red tabs labeled ring, locket, appraisal, ownership chain. The sound of the printer hummed like purpose. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the pile, proof so heavy it almost had a heartbeat. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. To Harris and Grayson. Subject, estate documentation. Harper family, please find attached full documentation verifying the original allocation of heirlooms and chain of possession. I retain all originals and will respond through formal channels if necessary. Send. 4 hours later, my phone buzzed with an email reply from Mr. Grayson himself. Grayson. Thanks, Valerie. This is very thorough. In my opinion, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. I'll respond accordingly. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Relief didn't come right away, because sometimes justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like exhaustion. Still, it shook me, because the one thing grief doesn't prepare you for is the second betrayal. The one that arrives long after the funeral, when the casseroles have stopped coming and everyone's agreed to be kind. The betrayal that pretends it's about fairness, but is really about rewriting the past. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I drove to Mom's favorite diner on the edge of town. The one with chipped yellow booths and Elvis photos hung slightly crooked on the walls. The waitress, Donna, still recognized me. "Coffee, hun?" "Black," I said, "and a side of grits, over easy eggs." Mom's order, always the same. When the plate came, the steam fogged my glasses. I rested my palms flat against the Formica table, the surface tacky from years of syrup and conversation. The smell of bacon and bleach wrapped around me like nostalgia's cruel twin. She would have said, "Don't let her rewrite the story," so I didn't. The final act wasn't planned. Not really. It began as impulse, the kind that starts with a restless night and too much scrolling. When the Vineyard posted photos from Rachel's engagement brunch, still, even after the fallout, I paused mid-scroll. There she was, holding her glass in the air, mid-toast, the ring gleaming, smile perfect. The caption read, "A legacy of love." The comments were nauseating. Friends, old coworkers, even Evan's relatives gushing over her grace through adversity. Dozens of hearts, clapping emojis, and "so proud of you" messages. And that's when I understood. She wasn't done. She was still trying to wear the lie like a crown, still performing the version of herself that people believed in. So I made a new account. Clean. No name, no trace. I posted 3 photos. First, a cropped image of the estate document, the section clearly marked with gold ring, single diamond, designated beneficiary, Valerie Harper. Second, the jeweler's receipt, Rachel's signature visible under customer Rachel Harper, resizing of heirloom ring. Third, the mirror photo from the dinner, her hand mid-air, the diamond blazing under the lights. Caption, Not all heirlooms are earned. Some are stolen and paraded in plain sight. No hashtags, no drama, just the truth left on the table. Then I tagged the Vineyard's account. The photographer, Evan's mother. I didn't expect it to explode. I didn't need it to. I just needed the right eyes to see. By evening, the Vineyard quietly removed all of Rachel's photos from their feed. The caption, "A legacy of love," disappeared like it had never existed. An hour later, I got a private message from the photographer. Photographer, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Do you want me to delete all copies?" Me. "Yes, thank you." 2 hours after that, a notification blinked. A new comment from Judith, Evan's mother. Judith, "Truth always has a way of resurfacing. Wishing you peace, Valerie." That was when I knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. The fallout was fast. Rachel's accounts vanished the next morning. Deactivated, gone. Her lawyer withdrew the probate inquiry within 72 hours. Then, a week later, Dad called. His voice sounded older somehow. "I didn't know she was trying to change the will," he said. "I didn't know, Val. I'm sorry." There was a long pause, just the hum of static and breath. "I know," I said softly. "Thank you for calling." We didn't say much else. Some silences don't need filling. The rest of the family split in quiet ways. Some took her side, muttering about public shaming. Others stayed neutral. No one questioned the facts again. The red binder stayed on my shelf, the ring stayed in my drawer, and my mother's legacy, her insistence on truth over appearances, on proof over performance, stayed stitched inside me like a second spine. That weekend, I printed a photo for the living room. Thanksgiving, years ago. Mom sitting at the table, the ring glinting on her hand as she held a coffee mug. No makeup, no jewelry beyond that. Just her, in her favorite sweater, smiling at something off camera. I placed it beside the velvet box on the sideboard, not as a shrine, but as a bookmark, because grief doesn't end. It just turns the page. 3 weeks after the brunch, I got a letter in the mail I didn't expect. It was hand-addressed, thick, the kind of envelope that makes you hold your breath before you open it. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. The measured, careful slant of someone who always printed instead of cursive. It was from Evan. Not a text, not an email, a real letter. The kind that smelled faintly of ink and rain. The kind that forced you to slow down because there was no scroll bar, no notification chime. Just the weight of paper and intention. Inside were 2 pages of unlined stationery, folded neatly into thirds. The ink was black, clean, and deliberate. There were no smudges, no crossouts. Every word looked like it had been tested before it was written. He didn't waste words. Evan. I thought I knew who I was marrying. I thought I understood what family meant, what legacy meant. But you showed me something different that day. Not in anger, not in drama, but in truth. And I won't forget that. His handwriting was steady, almost elegant, the kind of script that made even simple words look sincere. He wrote that he'd moved out of their shared lease, that he was staying with a cousin in Asheville for a while. Said he needed quiet, space to think. He wasn't sure what came next, but he was grateful. Not because the engagement ended, but because it ended before the marriage did. And at the very bottom, beneath his name, in the space where most people would write sincerely or take care, he'd added one more line. I hope someday someone gives you a ring, not because it's owed, but because it's earned. I read that last sentence 3 times. The pen pressed a little deeper there, the ink slightly darker, like he'd paused before finishing. I folded the letter slowly, like something fragile I wasn't ready to put back in the box of my life. But the truth was, I didn't need a ring. Not anymore. Because the one that mattered, my mother's, wasn't about inheritance or possession anymore. It wasn't about what had been stolen. It was proof that some things, once reclaimed, lose their need to be worn. It had become something else entirely. Evidence, memory, clarity. 2 months later, I saw Rachel again. It was at a family baby shower. Not ours, of course. A distant cousin's suburban backyard, the kind of gathering built out of folding chairs, dollar store banners, and polite small talk. Someone had strung fairy lights along the fence, and a Bluetooth speaker played country covers of pop songs. The air smelled like sunscreen and cheap rosé. She arrived late. I saw her the second she stepped through the gate. Beige dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry. Her hands looked bare, pale, almost unsure of where to go. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she was performing. She looked quiet. She didn't come near me at first. I stood by the porch rail, plastic cup of lemonade sweating in my hand, pretending to watch the bees hovering near the cupcake table. The laughter around me felt distant, muffled, like a TV playing in another room. I could feel her presence behind the small talk, like a change in temperature. An hour passed. She kept her distance. Then, when the group moved inside for cake and chatter, she walked toward me. The boards of the deck creaked under her sandals. "Hey," she said. I turned. "Hey." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, like all the edges had been sanded down. She looked down at the grass, then back at me. "You didn't have to do all of that," she said quietly. "You know that, right?" I did. She nodded once, slowly, like she'd already expected that answer. Then, after a long pause, she said something that surprised me. "You were always stronger," she said. "I hated that about you." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of cut grass. I didn't reply. She stared at the ground again. "I wanted something that would make people look at me and see legacy," she said. "Not just leftovers." "You had your own things," I said. "You just didn't want them. You wanted mine." Her lips parted like she might argue, but she didn't. Her eyes stayed dry, but her mouth tightened. The kind of expression that comes when someone's been holding something bitter too long and finally realizes they can't spit it out. "Did you ever love me?" she asked suddenly. "Even when we were little?" The question hung there, softer than accusation, heavier than nostalgia. I turned, studied her face. The same freckles, the same eyes, but a stranger's exhaustion behind them. "I did," I said, "until you made me choose between loving you and respecting myself." Her breath caught, just once. For a moment, neither of us moved. The party noise inside blurred into laughter and clinking plastic cups. Bees hummed lazily near the lemonade. A chime rang somewhere in the yard, maybe from a wind ornament. Then she nodded. Not in agreement, just recognition. "Okay, she said. That was it. No apology, no dramatic collapse, just a small crack in the wall that had stood between us since the funeral. She turned and walked away, her shoulders square but smaller somehow. I didn't stop her, because forgiveness wasn't the point. Closure wasn't the point either. The point was simple. She could no longer wear my mother's legacy and pretend it was hers. And I no longer needed her approval to believe in mine. That night, after the shower, I went home and opened the safe in my bedroom. The metal handle was cool under my fingers. I turned the dial, clicked it open, and pulled out the velvet box. Inside, the ring waited, small, steady, eternal. I held it in my palm, the diamond catching the soft lamplight. The crescent flaw still glimmered faintly under the stone, like a hidden scar that had learned how to glow instead of hide. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt settled. I placed it back in the box, then reached into the drawer beside the safe. There was a new photo there, printed just last week. My mother, holding me as a baby. Her arms curled around me protectively, neither of us looking at the camera. We both looked off to the side, as if we already knew the world would be too much sometimes. I slid the photo next to the box and closed the drawer gently. No tears, just breath. The kind of quiet that means something's finally done. Then, in the stillness, I whispered, not to her ghost, not to the past, but to myself. She didn't ruin me. I just stopped protecting her from consequences. The room stayed silent, the air still, and for the first time in a long time, that silence didn't hurt. It felt like space, like the sound of peace finding its place again. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.